Now, I'm so excited to introduce my good friend Dimity Shepherd, an operatic mezzo-soprano with one foot in opera, one foot in musical theatre. Because here I was thinking, maybe we'll just have a stoush about which one's best. But she was willing to go so much deeper than that, with some brilliant insights into the voice, the mindset of a performer, and even the tenuous state of opera in Australia. Now, there's so much to digest, I didn't want to cut the conversation short. So in this video, now part 1 of 3, we talk about getting a start in opera and musical theatre, what it is to be a mezzo, and finding your individuality on stage. So please show Dimity some love in the comments, and I'll see you on the other side. Dimity Shepherd, mezzo-soprano, welcome.
Thank you.
How did you first discover opera, and how did you know it was for you?
Well, my mum says that she remembers me as a little kid on the front verge with, ABC radio happening in the house, and there was an opera on in the background. And, my parents didn't used to play opera, actually, although we had a lot of classical music around. But there was opera on the radio, and that I was imitating the opera out on the lawn, sort of, so I don't know why I did that.
Was there something that clicked at some point?
So I kind of realised that I loved producing my voice in that way when I was about 16 or 15 or 16, and I was at a high school called Perth Mod in Perth, which was a specialist music school, and I was on scholarship there, and we had a really great choir, and we just were all made to try out for a solo, and we did a Mozart coronation mass. It had a beautiful big solo in it, and Emma Matthews, who's ended up being a hugely famous soprano, and I both shared that solo and, would alternate it. And the pleasure of singing that was like a complete surprise to me, but it was wonderful. It was the first time that I felt the vibrations of producing your sound in that classical way where you actually feel it buzzing in your head because of the way you're producing the sound, and that's quite an addictive, euphoric feeling. And I think I got hooked on that feeling, and then also people loved it and it got me attention, and people seemed to think I was doing something special. So, of course, I loved that. And I thought it seemed easier than practicing the clarinet, which I learnt at the time. I, of course, realised later on that it's not easier than being an instrumentalist. It's just different. Yeah. But I just loved that happy accident of finding all that.
You made the decision to study musical theatre.
I did.
What was that choice? And in hindsight, was it the right choice?
So I actually went straight from school into the conservatorium as a classical singer there. And Richard Gill was the head of the con then. It was a special time there. But we did, history, harmony, orchestration, as well as singing lessons and things. And it was housed in the same building as the School of Dramatic Arts, which had an acting course and music theatre course, as you know, at WAPA. And I used to always look at the music theatre kids who were still having solo singing lessons, but they were doing dancing and acting instead of harmony and orchestration. And that appealed to me more. I wanted to be, I always wanted to be dressing up and being characters and things as well. So I rationalised to myself that opera was a kind of music theatre, and I spoke to John Milson, the then head of WAPA, when I auditioned, and sort of said, can I have the same teacher that I would have at the con, and keep learning classically. And so that's what I did. So even then, even when I was in the opera world, I was looking at the other world going, but I want to kind of be there too. And then once I moved to the music theatre world, a part of me was always looking back at the conservatorium, and I still wanted to come out and sing in operas as well as other things. I think for me, that feeling caught between worlds, which I still feel, which I think is my superpower really, but it's also sometimes a lonely place occasionally, because I think you don't
tick the boxes.
You don't always, you don't fit into one box easily, one box as the sort of definitive choice for one particular box. My diversity keeps me working, and when they want an opera singer who's prepared to step outside the normal realms of that world, I'm often the person or one of the people that gets called on for that sort of thing. but yes, that was still. I still sometimes felt like a square peg in a round hole in it. Sometimes, yeah.
So once you started working, what was the first professional job you got where you thought, "Oh, this is a big deal"?
I think that when I graduated, I floundered a bit. I came out with an expectation to work, and then I didn't work straight away as easily as some other people did. And that was, again, that thing of being caught between worlds. I think I graduated and thought I wanted to go and explore being an opera singer, but I had been being extremely experimental with my voice, and I wasn't quite at the level of where I needed to be with my opera singing in some ways as a result of that. Yeah. And then I still was attracted to wanting to go for music theatre jobs. And I remember I did a Les Mis audition, I think it was, at one point, and I remember I sang a belt song, and then they really liked it. And then I said, can I sing it for you the way that I'd like to do it 8 shows a week, which was using a cheap belt at times instead and things. And I did that, and they sort of said, well, we want the first version. And I just knew I couldn't do that 8 shows a week and be the artist I wanted to be in my artistic progression.
So maybe that's a really good lead in to talk about the voice. For non-singers, how would you describe head voice versus chest voice?
One thing I almost feared today about this chat was the idea of how to technically describe what things are, because...
What's your perception of it?
My perception of it, well, head voice is... It's... I'm turning my voice. When I sing classically, my larynx is low and I'm turning my voice. Chest voice is taking the bottom sound. It's working from your spoken register up, yes. I guess. The spoken register, that's
nice.
Right way. God, it's unbelievable that I'm so bad at describing this.
It's funny. I think you could talk to 100 people and have 100 different ways of describing it. Because I often talk about chest voice feeling broader and head voice feeling finer and more focused.
Right.
And I think when you get to a certain part of the voice, the tension, and this is just my perception of it, and this is a man talking about falsetto, which might be different from talking about head voice, is that once there's a certain amount of tension to get a certain part of the voice, something in the larynx changes position.
Yes.
And then you get that finer sound, which is the head voice or the falsetto. Yeah. And I think what opera singers do extraordinarily well is to build on that finer sound to really kind of bulk it out.
It doesn't really feel like a finer sound to me now because it's
so supported.
It's so supported and strong. Also, interestingly, because I work that head-chest mix and break a lot as a singer that's, singing in that lower register often. And when I do that, often I don't even know if I'm in head or chest voice now.
It's so second nature.
Yeah, so that's taken years and years of work to be like that. When my voice is tired, I can tell. And when I start being able to tell that there's a change there that's not smooth, and I'm thinking, oh, I'm in head now, oh, I'm in chest now, that's usually a sign that I'm either vocally fatigued or I'm not singing quite as technically well. And the head-chest passaggio is a difficult one to learn.
And I think a difficult one to describe. I think when I often work with singers, I try to encourage them to explore, and I go, yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Because it's very hard to just talk it in words till you experience it.
Yeah.
So for me, it's creating opportunities for them to kind of fall into the experience, and it's like, yes, that's it. When I've just spoke about to people about what first came to mind when they thought of opera, the word that kept coming up was vibrato.
Yeah.
Because it's a distinctive feature, not exclusive to opera, but it's very distinctive in opera. Again, a bit like head voice. Is it a convention, is it a rule, or is there a technical reason for vibrato in opera?
Well, a vibrato in the voice is a natural thing to happen when you're singing classically. It is a natural thing. There are classical singers who sing without it too. There's a whole school of thought in Baroque that says let's not sing with, let's not
a bit like
sing.
String players.
Yeah, let's not sing with any vibrato. So, what we're trying to do as opera singers is be able to get over an orchestra without a microphone. And then when you're making the sound that way, vibrato becomes a natural thing that's helping that power. We're trying to do maximum sound with minimum effort.
Often when I'm working with singers, I often identify a number of different uses for vibrato, and I'd be interested to hear whether these align with you or not. One of them is simply to shape a phrase or a sound as an ornament. One of them is purely technically that if you're holding a sustained note, sometimes you can get fixated and stiff.
Yeah.
And adding vibrato can actually loosen up the mechanism.
Yeah, to me it's a natural thing when I'm singing well that there is a vibrato happening.
And then the third one is, I think it's those fluctuations that increase the harmonic content to cut through the orchestra.
Yeah.
Would that?
Yeah, I mean,
valid.
Yes, they're all valid. Absolutely. I think that, I work with a really good classical coach who feels that I mess around with my vibrato too much because I like to think that I can sometimes sing with it, sometimes sing without it, depending as a choice, as
an expressive tool.
As an expressive tool, I still essentially I'm not comfortable in an operatic piece not using vibrato the whole way through, but I do. Especially when I'm singing contemporary opera, sometimes I'll be trying to sort of make a sound that is. Sometimes I'm making a choice to sing in a hybrid kind of way, and I might not use vibrato for sections of that. But this wonderful, wonderful coach who understands a hell of a lot about how to make singers sing well will say to me, "Why are you not letting your vibrato thing?" Or I'll choose to sing a whole section of a Baroque thing that I was singing recently with him without vibrato, and he said, "Well, I'm not a fan of that."
In musical theatre, we wouldn't sing Rodgers and Hammerstein the way we sing something like Hamilton or Next to Normal.
That's right. So which is the real
styles evolve
exactly?
But opera has an even longer history.
Yeah.
Is it possible to sing everything, or do you have to specialise?
Oh, you have to specialise in terms of the standard repertoire. You cannot sing everything. People specialise in little niches in that repertoire, and some voices can go over more farce, we call it, than others. An interesting question is, what is your true voice? I feel like my true voice absolutely has classical elements in it. But then other people would say that was a learnt sort of thing. But then, I saw Carla Gare singing like an absolute demon the other night in My Brilliant Career. She absolutely floored me. Amazing. She's singing and she sings with a, real belt that goes up really high. It's a very modern style kind of belt. Is that a more natural sound than a classically produced sound? I don't think it is. I just think it's a different choice. And I think there are amazing singers in all different kinds of
I think we calibrate our voices to. I think there's like a natural instinct for where we are, but I think within those areas, I think we also calibrate our voice to that. I could sing a rock song, but I wouldn't sound like a rock singer.
Yeah,
I'd probably have to take a couple of months to recalibrate my voice.
Yeah,
defining those stylistic conventions more authentically.
Yeah.
What is a mezzo-soprano? How does it fit into the range of sopranos in opera? Because there are a lot of designations, aren't there?
There are. So we've got, there's soprano, mezzo, contralto in female voices broadly, but each one of those categories then has a whole lot of subcategories.
So what are some of the subs?
So there's, coloratura soprano, lyric soprano, dramatic soprano, spinto, soubrette. There are a lot of different categories.
So the initial soprano, mezzo, contralto, are they simply about range, or are they also about
tone colour primarily, and range of. It's about where you tend to sit mostly when you're singing.
Yeah.
So a mezzo is lower in general than a soprano, but it doesn't mean you don't still have I've worked as a coloratura soprano a lot, mezzo soprano. Coloratura mezzo soprano, not soprano, but that means I frequently sing top C's on stage, and I can sing even higher than that. But my meat and potatoes of my voice is I can't sustain sitting up high for too long.
Yeah,
I need to sort of run up there or pull out the occasional high note, but sit lower.
So
the colour of my voice is darker.
Right.
And this is where it's interesting with opera music theatre too, because what we do as a mezzo-soprano in opera is it's because your head voice, your low head voice is rich and dark and carries. There's not a huge place for that in most music theatre repertoire, because in music theatre repertoire the darker voice is the belt voice usually, and belting taking your chest voice higher.
Yeah.
And then the soprano sounds in music theatre are often more the pretty girl sounds, like they're often
More flute-like.
Yeah, it's more like, the Cosette kind of sound. It's like it's the innocent girl sound kind of thing. It is often more what that classical sort of sound is representing in the music theatre world. And so for a true mezzo-soprano, there's not really a place for you as easily.
And I think in a way the roles of the soprano in opera and musical theatre are slightly different in that in musical theatre, the head voice person, usually designated soprano, rarely goes above the stave.
That's right.
Whereas the ensemble, to do harmonies, they will go much higher.
Right.
Whereas in opera, it's the other way around. Usually the soloist is expected to have a more extreme range.
Yeah. Opera does require a huge range.
So are there,
whatever voice type you are, really.
So is bringing that head voice down in opera, is it a convention, is it a rule, or is there a technical reason?
Yeah, well, that's, again, I feel like all these questions, even if as I'm answering them, I sort of say one thing and realise that there are
exceptions.
There are exceptions for everything. So, and actually, for a classical mezzo, I go into my chest voice earlier than a lot of mezzi do, and I have a big beefy chest sound, which I think is one of the best aspects of my voice. I think it's a kind of special thing about my voice, but it's there's some repertoire, some classical repertoire where that is an absolute plus, and some where it's a bit of a no, and you don't do it.
Give an example of maybe some mezzo roles in general, and then some mezzo roles that really utilise that sound.
So, for instance, if you're singing Eboli in Don Carlo, the Verdi, which is a role I would love to sing. I sing the arias, but I haven't performed it. It's not very often performed, that piece either. That's a big, epic, dramatic mezzo kind of role, and you really need to bringing out the sort of, evil chest sound is just really juicy and great in that role, and an absolute plus, and you have to have it. When I sing something like Handel's Messiah, which I do quite a lot, I use more chest sometimes. Well, actually, it often depends on what roles I'm singing at the same time, because if I'm singing a role where I'm using my chest voice a lot, then I want to bring more chest into that than a lot of people would consider tasteful.
Right.
But
audiences or for opera professionals?
Everyone's taste is different.
Yeah.
So some people love that. And then there's a version of it where I bring my head voice right down and don't allow myself to go into the chest. And that's sort of more the way that it tends to be performed by most people. And there's certainly a school of thought that says that's the way it should be done. Again, my dream version of it is actually to sing it that way a lot of the time, and then there are moments where the text is pretty outrageous in some of that, and the colour of I want with the text makes me then go, okay, I'm gonna use that evil chest sound here, and I'm gonna do it big time, because for me that satisfies me as a dramatic creature to do it that way. So the choices I make as an artist now, whereas I think another thing that I have suffered from a little bit, having that sort of foot in both worlds a bit, is that when I started off being employed in the opera world, I used to worry about whether I was doing everything, crossing my T's and dotting my I's in the right classical way a lot. And at this point, having worked for 30 years as professionally, I kind of think, I now understand that when people are hiring me, they want what's individual about me that I bring that no one else brings, and that's that's what we all need to think of more and more as artists. I think if I have any advice to young artists, and if I look back at myself as a young artist, I think I was in a headspace of worrying about pleasing others a lot.
Yeah.
And I can still fall into that. But I think that as you grow into yourself as a person, an artist, and you have more experience and you realize that you're not the only person who thinks you've got something to offer, you can then get a bit more comfortable with your own choices and say, yes, okay, there's this way of doing it or there's that way of doing it. What's my way of doing it? What do I think? And what's going to excite me as a potential audience member if I'm sitting out there?
I know as I get older, one of the things that really fascinates me is that personality in the voice.
Yeah.
What makes that person distinctive rather than interchangeable?
That's right.
Because sometimes I hear people singing technically and it's like, technique is just the basic expectation.
That's right. Yeah.
What else do you bring that brings it to life?
That's right.
Because for me, singing is a conversation. It's not, you're not just singing at people.
Yeah.
It's a communication. And it's often that boldness that takes my breath away in people.
Yes, that's right. And I think that is in your individuality of the way you sing and the way you step on the stage as well. Like even when you're a character, there's still, it's like we have our own aura, if you like, that you bring on with you. And I think that the longer I do this, the more I feel like when I get the moment to step on the stage, you bring your successes, your failures, your life experience, the times when you didn't know if you were going to get out of bed, but you made yourself, the times when you felt like you were a queen, the times when you felt like someone had just tossed you away, all those things, they're all a part of that armor that then, that makes you the glorious human you are, the survivor you are when you step out there. And that is what I believe becomes really interesting when you see, especially, some people do have that from day one, but I do think that as actors and performers spend years with this lifestyle and going on, that is what it becomes about. You step on and it's like you're there to tell another story and you're surviving another day. It is, and that's profound, that stuff, I think. That's, this career path is hard. And the self-examination is hard. For a lot of us, the financial underclass you're part of as a result of being a freelance artist for a long time is hard and things. So you've got to get a lot out of it when you're out there. And I do. There are times I question continuing on this path. And then when you get the chance to go out and communicate with an audience like that and open your heart to them, the nourishment that hopefully goes both ways, it really does feel totally worth it in those moments. Now,
in part 2, we talk maintaining the voice, warming up, preparing for roles, and even casting in opera. Now, if you want to see what Dimity's up to, follow her on Instagram at Dimity Shepherd. But for now, thank you so much for watching. I do love you. Now get out there. Be brilliant.